With the release of Season 16 and its changes, legends like Pathfinder and Wraith have reclaimed their status as top 3 legends in the current meta. When Apex was first released, this was the same, except there was someone else. Someone who many pros consider to be the best pick in Apex, and that was Lifeline. The combat mechanic has had significant changes over Apex's history, and I'm going to be going over the most notable moments to find out how Lifeline went from the consensus must-pick legend in high-level play to a shell of her former self. AJ Shea, also known as Lifeline, was born and raised in Samathi. Her parents were wealthy war profiteers who exploited the frontier's people and resources for their own gain. AJ didn't agree with her parents' methods and decided that she was going to dedicate her life to helping others. Using her skills as a medic, she provided care to those in need, whether it was on the battlefield or in her everyday life, joining the Apex games to help fund humanitarian efforts. This made Lifeline one of the original 7 legends when the game first released. She was the first legend that most of us played, considering that she was used in the tutorial. Lifeline's abilities made her a top tier pick by many players and pros. Her abilities were powerful and useful in a variety of situations, like her passive ability Combat Medic that allowed her to revive teammates faster with an indestructible 180-degree shield wall. She had a second passive that gave her faster healing. This is important. A tactical, her Doc healing drone could heal her and her teammates in the middle of a fight, at the time only up to 150 HP, and finally her ultimate, Care Package, allowing her to call high tier loot for her and her team. At the time, this was her weakest ability and one of the worst ultimates in the game. Regardless, Lifeline was ranked highly among pros and content creators due to her small hitbox, fast healing, which made her survive gunfights, snowballing into her using her shield for added cover, winning most 1v1s and teamfights. At the time, Lifeline was the only character to have fast revives and fast heals. The only other way you could get fast healing was with a gold backpack. Thankfully, gold backpacks and Lifeline's fast healing never stacked. But regardless, you can see how effective Lifeline was because in early pro play like the Apex Code Red tournament and the first Apex LAN tournament in Europe, we saw the majority of teams running Wraith, Pathfinder, and yes, Lifeline, with subsequent winners of these tournaments having Lifeline on their team. However, as the game progressed and more legends were introduced, Lifeline's usage rate in pro play was sinking lower into the ranks. After dominating through the early days of Apex, as well as through Season 1, earning her the highest win rate in the game, the Respawn devs decided to undergo huge changes that would change Lifeline as well as the rest of the big 3 to limit their usage rate and keep them in line with the rest of the cast, leading to legend changes at the start of Season 2 in July of 2019, where Respawn would add low profile perk to Wraith, Pathfinder, and Lifeline. Low profile made legends with it take 5% increased damage. Later on, they would add Watson into this category as well, but this was done because these legends had smaller hitboxes, and because they were so hard to hit, they wanted to reward players for actually hitting them. But in actuality, this was done because they had insanely high usage rates. With the addition of low profile, they also added Fortify to larger legends like Caustic and Gibraltar. This is important to note because as Lifeline got more and more nerfs, there became other alternatives that could do what Lifeline could, and to some degree they could do it better. Although the perk changes were done in an effort to balance the big 3 and their encounter win rate, which suggested that when players went up against these legends, they would win more often. They also made an effort to nerf Lifeline's drone by making sure that it died after 2 ticks of storm damage. To be fair, this was done because during the final circle, Lifeline could drone and fast heal to secure free wins, which is actually how I got my first win in Apex. Regardless, the nerfs didn't impact her win rate as she still saw play, but was edged out in some lineups after the rise of Watson. But come Season 3, another legend would come to rise. See, although the nerfs to Lifeline didn't affect her much, Respawn was buffing another support legend, Gibraltar. He had gotten a huge buff in October of 2019 that gave him fast healing when under his dome, whilst increasing his ult damage and the distance that he could throw his dome. This was huge. Gibby could give fast heals to essentially anyone on his team. This was the same healing speed as Lifeline, while being protected with a 360-degree dome when compared to Lifeline, who's only for herself with a 180-degree coverage. This made Gibraltar push over on Lifeline in the higher levels of play. This was the case later in the season where we saw Gibby's pick rate rise. Although in casual play, Gibby's hitbox wasn't really favored, in ranked and pro play, Gibby's abilities were highly valued. Gibby went from the least played legend to the highest rated in high level play, sweeping Lifeline out of many lineups. Thankfully, in public matches, Lifeline still dominating, allowing for a more selfish playstyle with her fast healing while still providing a vital role in reviving her teammates. This kept Lifeline unique. Until January 2020, Gibraltar would get another buff that would change Apex and Lifeline forever. Gibby can now get fast revives in his dome. Up until now, Lifeline was the only legend that could revive faster. This was because she was the combat medic. She was the only support legend in the game, while Gibraltar was more defensive. Allowing for Gibraltar to get fast revives changed how many saw Lifeline. Why use Lifeline's res when you can use Gibraltar's, whose dome is 360 degrees? And in many instances, Gibraltar's ultimate could be thrown down right on top of its dome, allowing for even added cover. This was the sentiment that many players had in the community. And while Gibraltar would get stronger and stronger with more buffs, Lifeline would get another indirect nerf with the devs tweaking low profile, making it so leg shots counted as body shots. This was tough for Lifeline considering that she was basically 60% legs anyway. And by the time Season 5 rolled around, it was a consensus that Lifeline needed a rework. However, at the start of Season 5, Lifeline wouldn't get one. Instead, another suffering legend was given the rework, Mirage, allowing for Mirage to revive his teammates whilst invisible. Although not as safe as a Gibraltar or Lifeline res, it was still a revive that was considered one of the best, taking away usage from the combat medic. However, during that season, during the Lost Treasures event, Lifeline would get a rework where her passive ability, Combat Medic, was changed, allowing for her to revive her teammates with a shield wall automatically. This was huge. It fundamentally changed how we saw Apex. No one had ever seen a revive that could be done automatically, allowing for Lifeline to still shoot at the enemy team. This was probably the biggest disadvantage of performing a revive. And now Lifeline alone, was able to circumvent this, making her unique again. They also made her care package more reliable when it came to giving loot, with more useful attachments and ammo. Although in the highest level of play you still saw Gibraltar over Lifeline, in ranked play, Lifeline thrived. This was amazing. And from that update on, it became a universal rule that in ranked, if you see a Lifeline, it became your mission and your mission alone to make sure that she was knocked first. Lifeline became a legend that would grief anyone's KP if given the chance. Although she got all these buffs, it didn't come without any nerfs. They removed Lifeline's 25% fast healing, and they increased her revive time from 4.5 seconds to the standard 6. Of course, there were a couple other things like reducing her cooldown and improving her overall care package. For many Lifeline mains, this was their pride and joy. This is what they loved the most about playing Lifeline. This was a good rework, but for some Lifeline mains, it came at a net loss. They also changed the gold backpacks perk. Instead of fast healing, it gave extra shields and health when you got revived. This meant Gibraltar was the only legend in the game that had fast healing and fast revives, period. Although in the same patch it was reduced from 25% to 15%, it still made Gibraltar the consensus pick if you ever needed adequate healing for your team, because everyone could benefit from the healing when inside the dome. Because at this time, Lifeline's healing drone could only give out 150 HP maximum to everyone on the squad. For Gibraltar, it didn't matter because in his dome you could pop a whole Phoenix kit in there for about 7 seconds whilst being protected the whole time. These changes will stay for about a year until Season 8 and the Caustic Town takeover. They would remove Gibby's 15% fast healing, while subsequently giving him a couple of other nerfs like allowing damage to bleed through his gun shield. Up until now, the current landscape was fine. Most legends were balanced and those that were in trouble were getting fixes. However, there were still issues with Lifeline. She was just too frustrating to play against. If someone ever got knocked, there was no way you can guarantee that you could thirst them. Assuming only one is knocked, Lifeline and the second person can have their hands free shooting at the enemy team, whilst the third person can get revived. Compare this to Gibby's fast revive, where only one person will have the hands free. It just made it harder to attack a Lifeline res compared to a Gibraltar res. The community called for reworks and tweaks to Lifeline's ability, like giving the passive a cooldown. That way she couldn't just continuously spam the res shield at infinite HP every single time. Another idea was to make sure that way the shield had 150 to 200 HP. But the devs didn't budge. Instead, at the start of Season 9, the devs would take away her shield entirely. But to balance this, it allowed Lifeline to res both her teammates at the same time, still with no shield. This was clearly a nerf to Lifeline, regardless of how you thought of it. Lifeline basically had no counterplay. With Gibraltar, his dome can be used defensively, but he can also bubble peek, allowing him to counterplay using that defensive ability. With Lifeline's drone that had a shield, she could counterplay with it. Now she couldn't. They gave her a passive that can only be used to its fullest capabilities when both teammates are knocked. At that point, it's useless. Any confident squad will push the Lifeline. It was so very clear that it was a nerf because they buffed her ultimate as well, basically making it to what it is today. At this time, they would also remove low profile, but it didn't matter because they also increased their hitbox. So there was really no benefit to playing Lifeline whatsoever, except this was Season 9, which means this was the debut of Arenas, the short-lived permanent game mode, which was Apex's tactical shooter game mode, featuring 2 squads battling head-to-head in tiny POIs. If you played Arenas, you would know that Lifeline at this time was a must-pick legend because of her ability to revive teammates automatically. Something about Arenas just made Lifeline just better. Because of the emphasis of corners and peeking in Arenas, most people that were knocked were quickly able to be revived because they were around corners. There wouldn't be many instances where you would get knocked in Arenas and just be out in the open. Gibraltar was still a good pick as well. Because only one person would be able to shoot during Gibraltar's revive, it made it easier for squads to push him. And just like that, Lifeline was at the top of the leaderboards again. But we all know that Arenas didn't pan out the way Respawn wanted it to. But it was clear that Lifeline had an issue, a power creep issue. One that couldn't be fixed no matter how much the devs tried. And they tried. Because they knew that if they buffed Lifeline too much, she'd become a must pick, a god tier legend that couldn't be touched. The devs had no other choice but to just downgrade Lifeline to the point where she's just a mediocre legend now. Lifeline has had 2 OP states in her lifespan. In Season 0 when she had the small hitbox, fast revives, and fast heals. And in Season 5 when she could auto-res with a big shield. In both instances, she had a high usage and high win rate. Clearly, the devs just didn't know what to do, and it was tough for the devs to find a middle ground for Lifeline, especially for all the different skill levels. So instead of dealing with Lifeline, the devs just introduced a whole nother legend in Newcastle, who had the passive ability to revive teammates with a shield, but can also move them as well. Ridiculous. When Arenas was still around, he was super strong, and even after Arenas, he's still considered a really good legend because Newcastle does something that Lifeline can't. He truly protects his team before they can get knocked. With Lifeline, she can only support her team by giving them health and killing on care packages, and her revive is only for the teammate once they've been downed. However, with Newcastle, his ultimate is a shield wall protecting his team before they can get knocked. His tactical is a mobile shield, so that way his team doesn't have to push into areas taking even more damage. With Lifeline, her teammates have to be injured, critical condition to have to use her drone, and then knocked to even use her passive. This basically brings us to where Lifeline is now. If you were to pull up any tier list video, many pros and content creators would say Lifeline is a middle of the pack legend who can do things pretty well, but once you have enough legend tokens, you might as well upgrade and go on to Newcastle. But if you intend on playing Newcastle, who has a bigger hitbox, you might as well practice with Gibby first. In usage rate, she's still being used, but that's because she's one of the original 8 legends. Because as it stands right now, there's so many legends like Mirage, Gibraltar, and Newcastle that can perform safe revives, along with legends like Loba and other support characters that can open blue supply bins for adequate healing. And with the introduction of Season 16 with smart bins and the assault class that can open these smart bins for extra attachments, Lifeline's care package doesn't seem as appealing anymore. Lifeline suffers from being too strong for her own good, but who knows, one day she might get a rework that may allow her to reclaim her status as the #1 support legend. Also, let me know your favorite Lifeline memory down in the comments, but that's it for Apex Archives. If you think I should do a history video on another legend, comment them down below. If you want more of my videos, make sure to watch this one, but until then, I'll see you in another video. Be mighty.